No one wanted to play with the billionaire's one-legged son, until a poor black girl appeared and changed his life forever. What happened next will shock you and warm your heart. Let's continue this story. The first time anyone saw him, they couldn't help but stare. He was a small boy with eyes too big for his face, full of wonder and curiosity, yet hidden behind a shadow of sorrow. He had only one leg, the other lost in an accident he barely remembered, and the world around him seemed to treat him as if that missing limb defined everything about him. Children in the neighborhood avoided him, their laughter cutting across the playground but never reaching him. He sat by the fountain, watching the others play, wishing desperately for someone, anyone, to notice him. That boy was Alexander, the son of one of the wealthiest men in the country, a billionaire whose name alone opened doors, commanded respect, and brought fear. Yet wealth could not buy friendship, and Alexander, despite his luxurious mansion, his endless toys, and a life that many would call perfect, was painfully alone. Inside the sprawling walls of his home, Alexander's father tried to make up for the accident by buying him every toy imaginable, filling his room with miniature cars, expensive trains, and even a custom-built wheelchair that could navigate every corner of the massive mansion. But toys could not replace the laughter of a friend, the warmth of someone who understood what it felt like to be left out, to be different. Alexander watched the world outside through the mansion's enormous windows, seeing children run freely, climb trees, and kick balls across the green fields. He longed to join them, but his disability made him hesitant, and his father's overprotectiveness only deepened the wall between him and the outside world. Meanwhile, not far from the mansion, in a neighborhood marked by worn-down houses and narrow streets, lived a little girl named Laila. Her life was the opposite of Alexander's. Her family had almost nothing, and her clothes were patched, her shoes worn to the soles. Yet there was a light in her eyes, a spark that refused to be dimmed by poverty. She moved with a grace and confidence that surprised people who underestimated her. Laila had learned early in life that happiness didn't come from toys or money, but from kindness, courage, and the willingness to see the world as full of possibilities. Every morning, she would run errands for her mother, help her younger siblings get ready for school, and then play in the dusty streets with whatever scraps she could find. Despite the hardship, Laila carried herself like someone who knew the world's beauty, even in the darkest corners. One chilly autumn afternoon, fate intervened. Alexander's father had arranged a charity event in the city's park, a gathering of wealthy philanthropists who prided themselves on their generosity. Alexander was pushed into the wheelchair, bundled in warm clothes, and taken along with his father, who believed the day might soften his son's mood. Alexander, however, dreaded the event. He hated being stared at, hated the pitying looks of strangers, and most of all, hated feeling invisible amidst the crowd. Laila, on the other hand, had come to the park to sell small handmade trinkets. She hoped to earn a few coins for her family, walking with a basket of colorful bracelets and tiny carvings she had crafted herself. She moved through the crowd with confidence, her bright smile catching the attention of several passers-by. But then, her gaze fell on a boy who seemed lost, small in his wheelchair, eyes scanning the crowd, as if looking for someone who would never come. Laila didn't think twice. She approached him, careful not to startle him, and said softly, "Hi, I like your shoes." Alexander blinked, confused. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. People either stared, whispered, or looked away in discomfort. But Laila's voice was warm, simple, and genuine. "My shoes?" he asked, tilting his head. Laila nodded, smiling wider. "Yes, they're shiny. I've never seen shoes like that before." And just like that, a fragile connection formed. Alexander felt a flicker of hope, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Someone had noticed him, not his disability, not his father's money, not the pity of the world, but him, as he was. They started talking, hesitant at first, sharing small words that gradually grew into laughter. Laila spoke about her family, her small adventures, and the funny mishaps of her day. Alexander, for the first time in a long while, felt the walls of loneliness crack. He told her about his toys, his mansion, and even his secret wish to play in the park without everyone staring at him. Laila listened with genuine interest, never flinching at his wealth or his differences, never treating him like he was fragile or broken. She saw the boy inside the wheelchair, and Alexander saw the girl who lived in a world of challenges, yet carried herself with courage and grace. By the time the charity event ended, the two had formed a bond neither could ignore, a friendship that transcended wealth, class, and circumstance, a bond born from empathy, curiosity, and the simple desire to be seen. The days that followed changed Alexander's life in ways no toy or mansion ever could. Laila visited him almost every afternoon, bringing stories from her neighborhood, jokes she had overheard, and sometimes little treasures she found, smooth stones, feathers, or a tiny handmade bracelet she insisted he wear. Alexander's laughter, once rare and hesitant, began to fill the halls of the grand mansion. His father, though skeptical at first, noticed the change and couldn't help but feel a twinge of gratitude toward the girl who had managed what money, tutors, and therapists had failed to do: make his son genuinely happy. Word of their friendship spread quietly at first. The mansion staff, who were used to seeing Alexander withdrawn and quiet, noticed him speaking, laughing, and even daring to wheel himself out into the gardens to show Laila his miniature car tracks. But as with all things unusual, whispers began to grow into murmurs of disapproval. "Why is a billionaire's son spending time with that poor girl?" some staff whispered. "She doesn't belong here," others muttered under their breath. Alexander, however, didn't care. He had found something far more valuable than wealth: acceptance, companionship, and someone who saw him for who he truly was. One rainy afternoon, Alexander's father invited Laila into the mansion for the first time. She hesitated at the grand gates, her small frame soaked from the sudden downpour, but she smiled bravely and followed the chauffeur inside. The mansion, with its crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and walls lined with priceless art, could have intimidated anyone. But Laila walked with her head held high, her eyes shining with curiosity rather than fear. Alexander watched her every step, proud of her courage and happy that she had accepted his world without hesitation or pretense. The father, a stern and powerful man, studied Laila carefully. He had expected a timid, shy girl, someone awed by wealth and status. Instead, he saw a little girl with fire in her eyes, intelligence in her gaze, and a kindness in her smile that disarmed him. "Alexander tells me you've been a very good friend," he said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. Laila nodded, shy but steady. "I just like him. He's different, but he's nice," she said. Alexander laughed at the simplicity of her answer, feeling warmth spread through his chest. The father softened, realizing that the world often measured worth in money and status. Yet here was a child showing him that true value was something far more profound. As weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened. Alexander began exploring parts of his home he had never dared to before, all guided by Laila's adventurous spirit. They played games in the vast gardens, rolled down soft hills, and even attempted small races with Alexander's wheelchair, each time laughing until their sides ached. Laila taught Alexander how to make little crafts, sharing skills she had learned from her mother, while Alexander showed her his collection of books and stories about distant lands, kings, and adventures that came alive through his imagination. Together, they created a universe where limitations didn't matter, where social classes disappeared, and where imagination and friendship ruled. Yet not everyone was pleased. Other children, those who had ignored Alexander before, began mocking him openly when he tried to leave the mansion with Laila. Playing with a poor girl? Seriously, they jeered. Alexander's heart sank, but Laila held his hand firmly, her voice calm and steady. "Ignore them," she whispered. "They don't matter. We're the only ones who count." Her confidence became his shield, and slowly, Alexander learned to stand taller, to smile despite the whispers and stares. In her presence, he realized he could be brave, not because he had to be, but because he wanted to be. One evening, after a particularly long day of laughter and play, Alexander and Laila sat by the mansion's fountain, their reflections shimmering in the water. Alexander turned to her, eyes shining. "I never thought someone like me could have a friend like you," he said quietly. Laila shook her head, her small curls bouncing. "And I never thought I'd meet someone like you," she replied. "You're kind, you're smart, and you're not like anyone else I've ever met. That matters more than money or toys." Alexander smiled, feeling a warmth he had never known before. That moment solidified a bond that was unbreakable, a friendship that was about more than fun or play. It was about trust, respect, and understanding. But life, as it often does, was about to test their connection. One day, while the two were playing near the mansion's gate, a group of Alexander's classmates appeared, their faces twisted with jealousy and mockery. They had heard about the friendship, and they wanted to ruin it. They called Laila names, insulted Alexander's disability, and even tried to push him from his wheelchair. Alexander froze, fear and anger mixing in his chest. But Laila didn't move an inch. She stood in front of him, her eyes blazing with determination. "Back off," she said firmly, voice steady and unwavering. "He's my friend. You don't get to treat him like this." The classmates, stunned by her bravery, hesitated. Alexander felt a surge of pride and courage. He realized that with Laila by his side, he was no longer invisible, no longer powerless. After that day, something shifted. The children who had mocked him began to keep their distance, unsure how to deal with a boy who could laugh in the face of cruelty, and a girl who protected him without fear. Alexander's confidence grew, not because the world changed, but because he had someone who believed in him, someone who reminded him that being different was never a weakness. The mansion no longer felt like a prison, the gardens no longer intimidating. With Laila, Alexander had discovered a new world, a world where friendship mattered more than fear, where courage mattered more than appearances, and where love, even in the form of simple companionship, was the greatest treasure of all. As the weeks passed, Alexander and Laila's friendship grew stronger than ever. They explored every corner of the mansion together, from the grand library filled with towering shelves of books to the hidden nooks of the sprawling gardens where sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden streams. Alexander showed Laila his favorite stories, tales of heroes who overcame impossible odds, and she shared her own dreams of adventure and travel, of seeing the world beyond her small neighborhood. They laughed, planned, and imagined together, building a secret universe where nothing could touch them. Not loneliness, not cruelty, not even the whispers of disapproval from Alexander's father's acquaintances. But Alexander's father, successful and powerful as he was, could not ignore the world forever. One evening, after a long day of meetings and board decisions, he found his son and Laila sitting under a giant oak tree in the garden. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the scene, and the children's laughter floated through the air like music. The father's heart swelled with conflicting emotions. He was proud to see Alexander happy, finally free from his walls of fear and isolation, yet he could not ignore the reality of society's judgment. He approached cautiously, his deep voice breaking the calm. "Alexander, Laila," he began, "I need to speak with you both." Alexander looked up, startled, while Laila's eyes flicked to him, sensing the tension. The father sat down beside them, sighing heavily. "Alexander, I see how happy you are with Laila," he said, voice gentler than usual. "But you must understand, not everyone will accept her. People will judge. They may even try to hurt you, or her, because of this friendship." Alexander felt a pang of fear, but Laila squeezed his hand, grounding him. "We don't care what they think," she whispered. "We have each other, and that's all that matters." The father studied her for a long moment, realizing that her courage was exactly what his son needed. Someone who could teach him strength and resilience beyond what money or protection could offer. Not long after, a challenge arrived in the form of Alexander's school. His father had enrolled him in an elite private academy, hoping to integrate him into a world of peers and opportunities. But the reality was harsher than he anticipated. Alexander was stared at, whispered about, and treated like an outsider. The other children didn't just see his disability. They saw wealth, privilege, and someone they could mock with cruel amusement. For the first time, Alexander felt the sting of true exclusion, a pain he hadn't felt in the safety of the mansion or with Laila by his side. He began to withdraw, retreating into silence, his heart heavy with the desire to disappear. But Laila, ever resilient and fearless, refused to let him give in. She visited every afternoon, bringing small gifts and stories to lighten his mood. "You're not alone," she reminded him gently. "You never were, and no one can take that away from you." Her words were simple, yet powerful, planting a seed of courage deep within him. Slowly, Alexander began to face the world again, his confidence bolstered by the knowledge that someone believed in him unconditionally. He realized that bravery wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear with someone who supported you, someone who reminded you of your worth. One day, a particularly cruel group of students cornered Alexander in the playground, taunting him, calling him names, and even trying to damage his wheelchair. Laila, arriving just in time, stood in front of him without hesitation. "Stop!" she yelled, voice cutting through the chaos. The students paused, taken aback by her intensity. Alexander, feeling a surge of courage from her presence, spoke up for the first time. "We're not afraid of you," he said, his voice stronger than he knew he had. The students, stunned by the pair's unwavering resolve, retreated, unsure how to handle the determination of a boy who refused to be defined by fear and a girl who refused to let him stand alone. This incident marked a turning point. Alexander began to understand the strength that friendship could provide, the power of standing together against cruelty and judgment. He became more confident in school, participating in activities he had previously avoided, and even forming tentative friendships with a few students who admired his courage and Laila's unwavering support. The mansion, once a lonely fortress, now felt alive with possibility, and Alexander's heart was no longer weighed down by isolation. He had discovered something far more valuable than wealth, the unshakable bond of someone who truly cared, someone who saw him for who he was, not what he had. But life, as always, was about to test their bond in ways neither of them could foresee. One rainy afternoon, while Laila was walking home from the mansion, she noticed a commotion in her neighborhood. Her younger brother had gotten into an accident, tripping over a loose stone in the alley and injuring his arm badly. Panic surged through Laila, but she didn't hesitate. She ran to get help, her mind racing. Alexander, sensing something was wrong during their daily game in the mansion's gardens, immediately wheeled himself to the window, anxiety gripping him. He felt a strange pull in his heart, a need to be near her, to help in any way he could. The next hours were a whirlwind. Alexander's father, seeing the worry in his son's eyes, insisted on driving Laila to the hospital in the mansion's car. Alexander, for the first time, understood what it meant to be part of someone else's world, to step beyond his comfort zone to support someone he loved. Laila's courage, calm under pressure, and selfless love for her family inspired Alexander, giving him a newfound determination to be brave, not just for himself, but for those he cared about. That night, as they sat together in the hospital waiting room, Laila's younger brother safely bandaged and asleep, Alexander realized something profound. Life's greatest treasures were not wealth, toys, or status. They were the people who made you feel valued, seen, and loved, even in the darkest moments. From that day on, Alexander and Laila's bond grew stronger, resilient against the challenges of wealth, society, and circumstance. They became inseparable, a living testament to the power of friendship, courage, and the belief that kindness and empathy could transcend every boundary. And though the world outside still had its judgments, its whispers, and its cruelty, inside the hearts of Alexander and Laila, there was only light, laughter, and the unshakable certainty that they would face anything together. The bond between Alexander and Laila grew stronger with each passing day, but life had a way of testing even the strongest connections. One bright morning, Alexander received news that his father had arranged a trip abroad for the family, a luxurious vacation in a country far away. At first, Alexander felt a thrill of excitement, imagining new adventures, exotic sights, and the chance to escape the judgment of his peers. But that excitement quickly faded when he realized Laila could not come with him. Her family could not afford such travel, and the thought of leaving her behind made his heart ache in ways he had never felt before. For days, Alexander sat by his window, staring at the horizon, torn between excitement and sadness. Laila, noticing his quiet, finally approached him in the mansion's gardens. "You're worried," she said softly, her eyes full of understanding. Alexander nodded, unable to find words. Laila took his hand gently. "I'll be here when you get back," she promised. "And nothing will change between us. Distance doesn't matter if you care about someone." Her words, simple and sincere, gave Alexander a flicker of hope. But deep down, he feared that the world outside their friendship, the wealth, the social pressures, the judgment, would try to pull them apart. The trip abroad was a whirlwind of luxury and excitement. Alexander marveled at the sights, the exotic landscapes, and the grandeur of his father's arrangements. Yet, every moment, he thought of Laila, imagining her running through the streets of her neighborhood, playing with her little treasures, and wondering what she would think of the magnificent palaces and gardens he explored. He missed her laughter, her courage, and the way she had taught him to see the world with wonder rather than fear. Every evening, he wrote her letters, small notes filled with stories of his adventures, sketches of places he visited, and little jokes to make her laugh. Though miles apart, their friendship endured through the written word, bridging the gap between wealth and poverty, distance and closeness. When Alexander finally returned, he rushed to see Laila. The moment he saw her standing by the familiar garden gate, her hair tied back in her usual messy ponytail, her eyes bright and welcoming, he felt a rush of relief and joy. Nothing had changed between them. She hugged him tightly, and for the first time in days, Alexander felt completely whole. But their happiness was not without challenges. The other children at school, who had once mocked Alexander, had learned of his trip abroad and used it as a weapon to humiliate him further. "Oh, the billionaire boy travels the world while the rest of us stay here," they sneered, their words dripping with jealousy. Alexander's confidence wavered for a moment, but Layla's presence steadied him. One afternoon, as they played near the fountain in the mansion's garden, a new challenge arrived. Alexander's father, who had always been protective, had been advised by his business associates that the friendship between his son and Laila could be used as a publicity stunt. They suggested hosting events where she would appear alongside Alexander in charity functions, photo ops, and public announcements. To them, Layla's presence was a tool, not a child with her own dreams, her own struggles, and her own personality. When Alexander learned of this, anger and fear surged within him. He didn't want their friendship to become a performance. He wanted it to remain genuine, untainted by the world's expectations. He confronted his father one evening, voice trembling but firm. "I don't want her to be used like that. Laila is my friend, not a part of your image or your charity work. If she comes to events, it has to be because she wants to, not because you want it." His father, surprised by the intensity of his son's words, remained silent for a long moment. Alexander continued, "I care about her. And if anyone tries to take that away, or use her, I won't let it happen. I won't let you or anyone else turn our friendship into a show." The father studied Alexander, seeing in his eyes the courage and conviction that no amount of wealth could buy. Slowly he nodded. "I understand," he said softly. "I will not interfere. She will always be welcome as she is, not as a symbol or a tool." The relief that washed over Alexander was immense. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to protect their friendship from the world's interference. Laila, sensing the change in him, smiled and squeezed his hand. "We can face anything together," she said, and in that moment, Alexander knew it was true. Their bond had been tested by distance, judgment, and the pressures of society, yet it had remained unbroken. The world outside might still judge, whisper, and try to manipulate, but within the circle of their friendship, nothing could touch them. Yet life had one final challenge in store. One chilly winter morning, Alexander received an invitation to a school competition that could determine a scholarship for the next academic year. It was an opportunity to prove his capabilities, not just to the world, but to himself. The problem was that the competition required public speaking, and Alexander had always struggled with standing in front of an audience, especially after years of being teased and excluded. Panic gripped him, but Layla's unwavering support steadied him. "You can do this," she said, her voice firm. "I'll be right there, and I know you can shine. You've already overcome more than anyone else in that room." Her confidence ignited a spark of courage within him, and he began to prepare, practicing day after day, learning to trust his voice and presence. The day of the competition arrived, and the auditorium was packed. Alexander felt his heart pounding as he wheeled himself to the stage, every eye upon him. The whispers of judgment threatened to overwhelm him, but then he saw Laila in the front row, smiling, her eyes full of belief and warmth. Taking a deep breath, Alexander began to speak, his words flowing with clarity, courage, and authenticity. He shared his experiences, his challenges, and his dreams, speaking not as a boy with one leg or a wealthy background, but as someone who had learned the true meaning of strength, friendship, and resilience. The audience listened, captivated, moved, and inspired. When he finished, the applause was overwhelming. Alexander's eyes searched the crowd until they found Laila's, and in that gaze, he saw the reflection of his own courage, the affirmation that their bond had carried him through yet another trial. The judges awarded him the scholarship, but the victory felt secondary to the sense of pride, love, and unbreakable connection he felt with Laila. They had faced judgment, distance, and societal expectations together, and emerged stronger, their friendship unshaken, their spirits intertwined in ways that neither wealth nor poverty could define. The months that followed were filled with joy, growth, and the quiet triumph of two hearts bound by friendship. Alexander and Laila had faced challenges no child should ever have to face, yet each trial had only made their bond stronger. Alexander had grown more confident, no longer shrinking from the world or the judgment of others. He smiled more freely, laughed more openly, and discovered talents and passions he had never dared to explore before. And through it all, Laila remained by his side, unwavering, fearless, and endlessly kind. She was more than a friend. She was a guiding light, showing him that courage, empathy, and love were more powerful than fear, isolation, or even wealth. One crisp winter afternoon, the mansion's gardens sparkled with frost, the sunlight glinting off the frozen leaves like scattered diamonds. Alexander and Laila sat by the fountain, reminiscing about their journey. "Do you remember the first day we met?" Alexander asked, a soft smile on his face. Laila laughed, nodding. "I remember you staring at me like I had come from another planet," she teased. Alexander chuckled, feeling warmth in his chest. "I didn't know anyone would actually talk to me. Not like you. Not with kindness. You were the first." Laila reached over, squeezing his hand. "And you've been the first person to truly listen to me, too," she said. "We've both changed, haven't we?" He nodded, realizing how much he had grown, not just in confidence, but in heart. But their journey was not yet complete. Alexander's father, who had watched their friendship flourish, decided to take a step that would change everything. He arranged a private gala, inviting philanthropists, community leaders, and influential figures from across the country. His goal was not to use Laila, as some advisors had suggested, but to introduce her to a world of opportunities, education, mentorship, and resources that could help her achieve her dreams. He had witnessed the courage, intelligence, and resilience that Laila embodied, and he knew that the world deserved to see it too. When Alexander and Laila arrived at the gala, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never been in such a grand setting, surrounded by elegantly dressed adults who looked at her with curiosity. Alexander sensed her anxiety and took her hand. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll be with you the whole time." Her nerves eased as they walked together, and soon Laila began to speak confidently to those around her, sharing her ideas, her dreams, and her passion for helping her community. The adults were captivated, impressed by her intelligence, maturity, and the honesty in her words. Alexander watched with pride, seeing not only his friend's brilliance, but also the ripple effect of the courage they had nurtured in each other. The night ended with a special moment that neither would ever forget. Alexander's father called them to the stage, addressing the crowd with genuine pride. "This young girl," he said, gesturing to Laila, "has shown all of us what true courage, resilience, and kindness look like. She has not only touched my son's life, but has inspired everyone around her. Tonight, we honor her and the incredible bond she shares with Alexander." The audience erupted into applause, and Laila, cheeks flushed, smiled at Alexander. He grinned back, tears of happiness welling in his eyes. "We did it," he whispered, feeling the weight of every struggle, every lonely day, and every moment of doubt finally lift from his shoulders. In the weeks that followed, life continued to change for both of them, but the core of their friendship remained unshakable. Laila gained access to better education, mentors, and opportunities she had never dreamed of, while Alexander grew into a confident young boy, no longer defined by his disability or the wealth that surrounded him. They continued to explore, imagine, and play together, but now with the added knowledge that their bond could withstand anything: judgment, separation, or hardship. They had learned that love and friendship were not about status or appearances, but about seeing and supporting each other, no matter the obstacles. Years later, as teenagers, Alexander and Laila sat in the same garden where their friendship had begun, the fountain still sparkling in the sunlight. "It's amazing," Alexander said softly, "how far we've come. From that first day when I felt invisible, to now, when we can face the world together." Laila smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We've grown," she agreed. "Not just in the world, but in ourselves. We've learned to be brave, kind, and true. And we've done it together." Alexander reached over, taking her hand gently. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted. "You changed my life, Laila. You showed me what really matters." She squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening. "And you changed mine," she said. "You taught me that friendship isn't about where you come from, what you have, or what the world thinks. It's about heart, and our hearts will always be together." In that moment, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, over the fountain, and over two children whose lives had been forever changed by a simple act of kindness, courage, and belief in each other. The world outside would always have challenges, judgments, and struggles, but Alexander and Laila had learned the greatest lesson of all. When you find someone who sees you for who you truly are, stands by your side, and lifts you up in your darkest moments, nothing can break the bond you share. And so, with laughter in their hearts, hope in their eyes, and an unbreakable friendship that would carry them through every season of life, Alexander and Laila faced the future together, fearless, unstoppable, and forever united. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss a new story.